Hello, everyone, and Dr. Lathrop. Here with us is me, Sophie, Yvonne, Chloe, and Sarah, and today we will be talking about the case study about Bolthouse carrot juice and their outbreak with C. botulinum back in 2006. And starting off will be me and Sophie talking about who C. botulinum is, and then after that will be Yvonne talking about the product, which is carrot juice, and the company Bolthouse. And after that, we have Sarah and Chloe in the back talking about the outbreak and what measures were taken. So who is C. botulinum? It is Clostridium botulinum. It is a gram-positive bacteria, which is also a spore former, which we'll talk about later. And it is an obligate anaerobe, so that means it prefers no oxygen in its presence to grow. And once it's able to grow, it releases toxins that can cause neuropathic illness, known as botulism. And with C. botulinum, there are different types of strains that produce a type of botulinum neurotoxin, which can be considered type A through G botulinum neurotoxin, which Sophie will later talk about, which is right now.
Thanks, Isaac. So as Isaac said, yeah, there's a couple different strands of Clostridium botulinum. So there's strand A through G, but for all we know that the two types A and B, are the ones that cause illness. The other types may cause illness, but A and B definitely do. And these are the ones that are found in our food. So they're mostly found in canned products like canned fruits and vegetables, as well as fish. And they normally get it from soil or water contamination. So when they're in the ground growing or when the fish are in the water, they'll extract this Clostridium botulinum, and then when they're canned, they have the perfect conditions, the anaerobic conditions, for them to be able to grow. And so the Clostridium botulinum really does need to grow in order to cause the illness. So the conditions of the canned and treated food is really important. And there are specific conditions that really do allow for the Clostridium botulinum to grow. But Isaac will talk about that a little bit later regarding the water activity, pH, levels of salt and sugar, as well as the temperature. So after you ingest the bacteria, botulism will occur, and after 12 to 36 hours, the symptoms are going to arise. And really what it does is it just disrupts your nerve function, causing paralysis. So it really attacks your nervous system, which directly impacts your digestive system, and that's where a lot of the symptoms are found. So here on the right, you can see a chart with a couple of the symptoms, many of the symptoms, but there's also difficulty swallowing, dry mouth, blurred vision, trouble breathing, as well as nausea.
And the main concern about C. botulinum is that it's spores, and these spores are able to survive thermal processing, and these spores can later germinate in the food, creating or developing botulinum toxin. And one way to inactivate these spores is through retort processing, which is usually found in a lot of canning processes, which utilizes both high temperature and high pressure treatment. And without this retort processing, these spores can naturally be found in a product, which can later germinate with the specific conditions, or if the conditions are right. And for this case, it would be a lot of pasteurized juices. And one way for these pasteurized juices to ground this or slow down the growth of these spores is through right storage temperatures, which involve temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which will hinder their growth. But if these conditions are met with specific conditions which involve both or in total anaerobic conditions, high pH of above 4.6, low salt and sugar concentrations, the C. bot spores will be able to germinate and able to produce the botulinum toxin. And for carrot juice, these conditions are met, and if the temperature is not right, this can be a problem. And I think Yvonne will be able to explain that a little more.
The product we have is Bolthouse Farms 100% carrot juice, and its only main ingredient is carrot juice. It contains no added sugars, artificial flavors, or preservatives, and is vegan, gluten-free, and dairy-free. Within the process, carrots are first harvested, juiced, processed, and bottled within 24 hours. It's then cold pressed to preserve freshness with no use of preservatives. It's also flash pasteurized and cold aseptic filled, which is a method to protect against infections by pathogenic microorganisms in order to extend the shelf life. So within production, the whole carrots are first harvested from the fields, then shipped to the processing facility. They're then washed through high-pressure hoses to remove large amounts of dirt particles, then placed onto a conveyor belt. The carrots are then further washed to remove any remaining bacteria or dirt, then peeled and polished and sorted by weight for juicing. They're then placed in a 15-gallon blend tank to mix the ingredients for 2 to 4 hours. The juice blends are then flash pasteurized and cold aseptic filled and stored in an all-safe, sterile, and pressurized tank at 41 degrees Fahrenheit until bottling. The empty plastic bottles are then shaped and conveyed through the facility under an injector wheel to rinse and sanitize the bottles. The injector then fills each bottle with the carrot juice and is capped, labeled, and packaged. So Bolthouse Farms started off as a carrot farm in 1915 back in Michigan, but is now widely known, and its headquarters is located in Bakersfield, California. They now have extended their product line into produce refrigerated beverages, dressings, and carrots. Their beverages are categorized by fruits, vegetables, proteins, low sugar, and organic smoothies and juices. They also have another product called Bolts, which are functional shots that helps with immunity boost, energy, digestion, and metabolism. Their dressings are categorized by its creaminess and their vinaigrette and organic dressings. And their carrots can be used and categorized into cooking, snacking, and organic. Overall, they're still in business and have many of their products sold in grocery stores all across the US and Canada.
Now Sarah and I will talk about the outbreak. Back in September 2006, patients consumed Bolthouse Farms carrot juice and were infected with Clostridium botulinum. These products are sold in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Hong Kong, but the 6 patients infected during this outbreak were within the United States and Canada. There were 3 patients in Georgia, 1 in Florida, and 2 in Toronto. Unfortunately, there was 1 death during this outbreak, which is pretty rare for Clostridium botulinum. So now let's look at this a little more in depth. In September 8th, 3 patients went to the hospital in Georgia. They had symptoms of neurological damage and paralysis resulting in respiratory failure. The physician suspected foodborne botulinum. They notified the state health department and sent specimens to the CDC for testing. Once they heard back from the CDC, they had approved the administration of botulinum antitoxin. This helped reduce the progression of neurological symptoms, and eventually they stopped allowing the patients to start recovering, though they were still hospitalized and on ventilators. From here, the CDC conducted testing to determine where the Clostridium botulinum and the toxins came from. The 3 patients had 2 meals together, so they tested the leftover foods and they sent samples over to the CDC. From these tests, they were able to determine that the 1-liter bottle of Bolthouse Farms carrot juice was the cause of the illness. The juice tested positive for botulinum toxin type A. And then this toxin was also identified in the serum and stool samples of the patients. So from there, they were able to do whatever measures necessary with that information to perform any recalls. Next, later in September 16th, a patient was hospitalized in Tampa, Florida, with respiratory failure and descending paralysis. And this guy had a massive dose of the toxin because the toxin was inside for circulating for more than 10 days after the onset of illness, and the patient was completely paralyzed from this illness. Unfortunately, this is the patient that died from this outbreak. And then next, in October 7th, there were 2 cases reported in Toronto, Canada. There wasn't as much information on these cases, but both patients suffered from paralysis. And that was about it that was released from that. And now Sarah will hit on some additional information.
Okay, so additionally, Bolthouse Farms decided that they would have their facilities examined by both internal auditors and the FDA. And the results of that found that Bolthouse Farms facilities were compliant. They also decided, just as a precautionary measure, to test samples in the suspected lots for CBOT, and all of the juice samples came back toxin-free. And so from this, they concluded that the growth of the CBOT in the carrot juice was due to temperature abuse by the consumers. And this is because once they purchased the product, they remained unrefrigerated. And they found this out through the Florida patient who had a 1 liter bottle of carrot juice just left on a desk in the hotel room because there was no refrigerator that he could store it in. Also, as a result, Bolthouse Farms decided to do a voluntary recall on all of their 100% carrot juice products. So this included their Bolthouse Farms 100% carrot juice, the Earthbound Farms organic carrot juice, and President's Choice organic 100% pure carrot juice in the US, Canada, Mexico, and Hong Kong. And finally, the FDA decided that they were going to investigate the current industry labels at the time to see if they provided the proper refrigeration instructions for this product. Here are our references, and that's all, folks.
That's all, folks.